Is Jon Nelson actually a trash tattoo artist? Well, if you ask this kid Julian, the answer is yes.
This is what he did to that person. Look at those. Look at that line. Look at how all of these are funky. All of those are funky. This down here, super funky. What is that? You joking me? Let's look at the stencil again. Everything is perfect on the stencil. All the lines are totally straight.
Yes. Now, the tattoo he's talking about is this one, and I gotta say, it's pretty obvious to anybody looking at it, even if you're not a tattoo artist, there's some things that look wrong with it, especially right there in the center. You can absolutely see these lines are not straight, and definitely looks warped. It looks out of perspective, the lines look really wiggly, and all that, and so, yeah, I guess I can't really blame him for judging the tattoo harshly, but at the same time, this kid is 100% condemning Jon as an artist completely. And I gotta say, I don't have any dog in the race. I don't know Jon Nelson personally. I've never even spoken with him. I don't live in Florida. I'm not one of his competitors. But man, this guy was harsh, talking about how he needs a mentor and all this kind of stuff. Just brutal. And I asked myself, what is he, like a fellow tattoo artist? Is he like a competitor of his? Is he just like salty? Maybe he's just doing it for the views. And luckily somebody else already asked that. Are you a tattoo artist? They said. And he said, well, I got 50 hours in the tattoo chair and I got multiple artists that are my friends, so I'm about as close as it gets to being a tattoo artist. And I gotta say, by that logic, that is ridiculous. It's not like if you get a lot of surgeries and if you hang out with a lot of doctors and nurses that makes you a doctor. Come on, man, that is ridiculous. I even had to go look at this kid's tattoos to see how much experience does he have. And I see, it's just basically some kind of generic American traditional type work. I'm not dogging on it. I'm just saying it's simplistic type work. It doesn't look like top tier elite artists were working on him. Nothing custom designed, really, just kind of basic stuff. And so, yeah, when I look at the tattoo, I totally see it as well. But guys, there's a lot that goes into this that you gotta know. If you were a tattoo artist, you would understand. And first off, how smooth is this person's head, right? Is it a perfect dome? Well, it looks like in this picture that it is, because the outer edge there looks pretty round. But what you're not seeing is from the angle. You're not seeing where all the peaks and valleys are in this client's head. So you can't really look at a straight line on a round surface and determine if it's really straight or not. Now, the stencil looks immaculate, but again, if you're a tattoo artist, you would know this is a nightmare for any artist anywhere. I want you to imagine just drawing this on a piece of paper. Somebody lets you trace this on a light table, you grab a pen, you don't get a ruler, and start drawing them lines. See how many of those perfectly parallel lines come out nice and even for you. It's difficult for any human hand to do that, no matter how much practice you have. Now imagine trying to wrap it on a warped round surface like this. It doesn't work. You can't take a flat image and stick it on a round surface and just expect it to stay. So what an artist has to do, and what Jon did, is he put it in multiple stencils. Now the reason why that's significant is because when you do this, you have to then connect all of those perfect straight parallel lines. They have to connect and flow together. And so you can see up here in the top of this image where he connected those and how he connected those stencils. It's not easy to do. And when I see this, I'm actually really impressed. He did as good of a job as he did. But another factor, you got to ask, did the client hold still while he was tattooing it? Were they shaking? Were they moving? Were they even wiggling their foot? Any of that would have a major impact on these perfectly straight parallel lines. Another piece of info you're not going to know unless you've experienced it is how horrible it is to deal with a slick, oily, sweaty scalp. It's just difficult. They sweat, they're oily. So the stencil, as you can see up here in this corner, the stencil doesn't stay perfectly. So you don't have these perfect lines to trace, especially when it gets to bleeding and you're wiping and tattooing. It starts to smudge and smear as it did here. And you can imagine, as an artist, if you're in there trying to tattoo something where the lines are faintly there, your ink is smudged, it's bleeding, it's really difficult to follow all those lines precisely. So I don't want to be a dick and judge him based on one tattoo, especially such a difficult tattoo. And I would encourage you guys not to judge any artist based on one tattoo. It's just not fair, especially if it's something the client knows is maybe not a good idea. And head tattoos, you're going to get a kind of iffy outcome. Here's another example of one of Jon's head tattoos. You can see the stencil. It's really rough. It's hard to get that in there. Lines blur together, they overlap, or they just don't stick. And you might ask yourself, well, why wouldn't he just redo that stencil? Well, it's pretty easy because he could redo it 20 times and it might not come out this good. So a lot of us would just say, if you get it this good, then from here you should freehand those lines and just kind of measure the perspective by eye and eye it on your own, rather than trying to redo the stencil 100 times, hoping that it works out better for you one of those times, because it probably won't. And here's the outcome of that one. And you can see here, much smoother, straighter lines. cleaner work. I'm not seeing blown out lines. I'm not seeing lines that are too shallow. It just looks like clean work to me. Now, I'm not going to say that Jon is the best at line work. I can absolutely see there's areas where lines gap, or there's little places here and there. I kind of poured over these, and I can see that he absolutely sculpts his lines. And that means that he's going over them a few times to clean them up, doubling over them just to smooth them out. Maybe the first pass didn't hit right, so I'll try again. And I saw that in a lot of his work. But overall, I gotta say, he's a very impressive artist, and you can see he owns 2 different really high-end studios. He's got Borrowed Time Tattoos, and he's got Model Citizen Tattoo there in South Florida. So this is an award-winning artist, a guy who knows what he's doing. And when I see a lot of these kind of pieces in his portfolio, I dig through them, but yeah, I can find imperfections in pretty much all of them, and they're all just kind of minor things that I don't think any client would be pissed about. And speaking of clients, the client with that head tattoo was actually really happy. That was another fellow tattoo artist getting tattooed by him, and one that absolutely knew the risks of getting a head tattoo. They didn't expect it to be a perfect representation because they know that that's really, really hard to achieve on a head. And so when I'm looking at his other work, I'm just recognizing that it's very difficult, ornate, intricate work, and some of it comes out really clean and beautiful, and then other times I'll find little errors like this where it overlaps. So I don't think he's the best artist in the world, but I do think he takes on some amazingly hard pieces that I myself would probably pass on, and I think he does a really decent job at all of them. But yeah, when you're seeing little gaps there and just little bends in lines, when you're really realizing how many lines we're talking about and how small those details are, I just can't be too harsh. The one thing I gotta say is he has some really phenomenal work in his portfolio. It absolutely shows why he's kind of gained the credibility and the success that he has in the industry. Look at this tight detail shading. This is absolutely his wheelhouse, his MO. I saw a lot of things like this where it was just really beautiful work. This especially. Now, I don't know how a kid like Julian can look at work like this and then say to all his followers that this is a garbage tattoo artist, you shouldn't trust them. I just don't think it's fair. I think once in a while, clients have difficult requests, and we got to try to meet their requests, and you can warn them, you can tell them, it's not a good idea, or there's risks involved, but if they still want to do it, then, take it on, do your best, and they trust you, and you just do your best with it. And I think Jon has already earned his stripes. He doesn't need anybody's approval, especially not this Julian kid's, because he's putting together amazing compilations like this. Full custom design back piece, hours and hours of work, just beautifully done. And here's another one, just shockingly good work. So when I'm looking at this and I'm seeing a few little wiggles and I'm seeing that the perspective is off, I'm taking all those things into account and saying, you know what, good on him for doing this good of a job. And Julian, if you actually had any experience tattooing the top of a head, I don't think you'd be on here trashing him that much. All right, that's it for this one, guys. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.